Hi, my name is Brian, and I'm the High Pop Professor. And today I wanted to react to a post I saw on Facebook the other day on the Sports Cards Nonsense group. Always a fun, entertaining place to go. And I saw a post where someone had posted a beautiful picture of this 96 finest gold refractor, Ken Griffey Jr., and a PSA 9. And they were asking the question, and they were debating whether or not they should crack this out of the 9, peel the protective coating off of the card, and try to resubmit it to try and go for a 10. And a couple things went through my mind. It's a great question. It's exactly the right kind of question to ask, I think, because it might be one of those gambles that's worth taking the risk. And if it were my card, the couple things I would look for is I would look the card over very, very carefully. I would see, can I look at it and tell why I got the 9? And if it's something about, well, if it's off-centered, or you see a touch of white on a back corner, or there's a weird rough cut edge, which doesn't usually happen on a finest card, but still, or maybe there's something like a pockmark or a refractor line, print line, some other surface defect where peeling the coating off isn't going to change anything, then no, probably just leave it as it is and call it good. If, however, you do all of that analysis, you examine this card and find that, no, it looks like a perfect card, well, then you've got a true contender where maybe there's some blemish or some scuff, little scratch on the protective coating where you peel that sucker off, submit it, and you've got a real legitimate shot at a 10. And of course, well, how big of a windfall are we getting here? What's the difference between a 9 and a 10 price-wise? And that's where this one response caught my eye. So, I've been working through some refractor runs for Greg Maddux. And so it's not Griffey, but I do have some Griffey refractors. And there was one response that was basically saying, it's not going to work. This guy said 99 times out of 100, you're going to get the same grade or worse. It's not going to work. And then this guy goes on to say something to the effect of, well, the people really want the ones with the protectors on them. And you're going to have a worse ROI if it's peeled. And, and this guy details examples of sales of this card where the PSA 9 unpeeled outsells the PSA 10 peeled. And another one where a PSA 7 unpeeled outsells a 9 by like 3 times the amount. Anyway, my mind was breaking as I was reading this, because I was like, wow, back when I was picking up most of my Maddux refractors from my Maddux refractor run, and that wasn't that long ago, it was about a year or two ago, I was picking all these up and crossing them off my lists. And at that time, I hadn't noticed much of a difference between the value versus the ones with peel as compared to the ones without the peel. They seemed about the same to me. And even the population reports, the pops were a little bit different there. And where they keep track of them, there wasn't a gigantic difference there either. So it's mostly just a matter of personal preference. But has that changed? That made me curious. And so I decided to do a little bit of research, and I would like to share with you the research I was able to find. Now, I was not able to find every single one of the sales that this guy details in his post. And, look, I don't have a Market Movers, Card Ladder, VCP subscriptions. I don't have that. I have eBay completed auctions, and I've got 130 point, which, again, eBay only goes back 3 months. 130 point oftentimes just misses stuff. So, take it with a grain of salt. But I'd like to turn the camera around. I'd like to share the results of my investigation. And I would like to hopefully shed some more light and maybe offer a correction for what this guy was saying, or perhaps verification. So come with me. We'll turn the camera around and we'll take a look at these. All right, so first, let's look at this beautiful 96 finest set. And so Greg Maddux, of course, my guy, had a number of refractors from this set, from card number 1, the finest Intimidators from Series 1. We had then the finest franchises, the other silver refractor from Series 2, number 235. And he did have a gold refractor as well. This beauty, the sterling version. Fantastic. And it's this gold refractor that we're going to be looking at for Ken Griffey Jr. And thankfully, so Griffey, yeah, he's the most expensive basically in the set, not too surprising to see there, but thankfully there have actually been quite a few sales over the last 3 months on eBay that we can look at. Some of them are auctions, some of them are just fixed priced listings, buy it nows. But I wanted to see if I could find this guy's claim and the sales that he claims happened. I wanted to see if we found those on eBay, and some of them we did, some of them I didn't. So I just started looking at going back in time, and these were the sales I found. So for Ken Griffey Jr., we found on August 12th, there was a PSA 9. Now, I will distinguish whether it has with the coating or without the coating, but there's also another factor at play here, and I think that's that whether we're talking about an older PSA slab or a newer holder, a newer flip with the Lighthouse label. Generally, I think people want the newer ones. I think that the newer Lighthouse labels tend to command a slight premium, but again, you could take an older holder and submit that to get reholdered and get turn it into the light. So I mean, now the serial number wouldn't change, but still you could do that if you wanted to. So I'm going to mention every time whether it's an old or a new holder, and whether it's peeled or unpeeled. So here we go. So this is a PSA 9 with the protective coating, and it's an older flip, and it sold for $550, and this was on auction. Going back July 13th, we had a PSA 7, and this PSA 7 again with the peel, and it was a new holder, sold for $419.14. And so these are the two that, those are two of the four that this guy mentioned. So it's looking, but I kept on going, and I actually couldn't find the other two. I couldn't find the PSA 10 that sold for $510 or the PSA 9 that sold for $132 without the coating. I couldn't find those sales, but I kept looking, and I did find some with and some without. On June 22nd, there was a PSA 9 that was without the coating, that sold, within a new flip for $700. Whoa. Now, to be fair, that was a fixed price listing. Okay, it was not an auction, but still, someone, was paying $700 for that same card that, again, with, yes, an older holder, but with the peel, sold for $550. We keep on going, and the next one, about a week before, June 12th, another PSA 9, again peeled without the coating in a new flip, sold for $626, and that was through an auction. So far, the two, and really, those are the three we've seen in PSA 9s. The two that have sold for the highest, the 700 and the 626, those were both without the peel. And now, yes, they were both in newer holders, so that might be a part of it, but I'm not sure it makes as big a difference as this guy was saying. Anyway, and of course, going back, June 5th, there was a PSA 8 that did have the coating in a newer holder that sold for $445, which makes sense that the 8 $445 should sell a little more than the 7 at $419, and so nothing here is all that surprising. And what about PSA 10s? So we actually haven't seen a PSA 10 sale, and so I couldn't find one on eBay in the last 3 months. So I did check out on 130 Point to see what had happened. Now, it did find a bunch of PSA 10 sales, but the problem was they went back way farther than just this year or even last year. So honestly, any prices from, anything from 2019 or before is completely irrelevant. But honestly, all the crazy roller coaster ride from 2020 through 2022 of going way, way up and then way, way, way down again, kind of, kind of just want to throw that out because it doesn't seem like we should be doing that. Not really relevant. So yeah, there were two really high sales. The highest ever sales, of course, were in 2021. No big surprise. We had $2,774 via auction, and $2,650 were the other two highest sales, right in the middle of 2021. So not that surprising, I would say. Those both did have the peel on it and were in older flips. However, when you look at the more recent ones, like from 2023 onward, and I understand between 2023 and 2025, we've had some shifts too, but nothing as dramatic I would say. Maybe a slight rise in 23, a slight tail off in 24, and then a rise again in 25. But still nothing nearly as dramatic as what was happening between 2020 and 2022. And so looking at these, there was one, the PSA 10 that sold for $2,400 in February of 23, and that was without the coating. That was peeled in an older slab, an older flip. And again, we have another one just this year in February 9th, 2025, that did sell for $1,890. Both of those last two sales were fixed price listings, so they were not auctions. And so again, got to take that with a grain of salt. Maybe they just listed it too low. You don't really know. But the point being that with the 9s anyway, it seemed like the ones that had been peeled finished at the same amount or higher than the unpeeled ones. So it appears to be, and again, I'm taking the exact card that this guy was running on with the example. And again, like I said, I don't have other sources of data. I'm not saying that those sales didn't happen. I just can't find them with the tools that I'm using. So so the tools that I'm using would appear to show the exact opposite thing. So there is that. And so I got a little curious because the 96 Finest set, I mean, that's a great set to choose to use. But I was curious whether or not that trend of these peel versus no peel and how that impacts the value doesn't matter on other sets. And so I got curious about 95 Finest. And so here are a couple cards from 95 Finest. Here's a Griffey and a Maddox. And just absolutely love these cards, love these sets. And as you can see, both of these are in fact peeled. All right, so yeah, what about these? Is there anything there? So I decided to go ahead and take one more look at the Griffey for this 95 Finest set. Also, and part of the reason why I'm choosing Griffey, not only is he a valuable data point, being generally the highest value player in the set, but the card transacts often enough where you can find some reasonable data on here. So looking at these, we had a couple of PSA 8 sales of this 95 Griffey. And so we had on June 8th a PSA 8 with the coating sold for $450. We had on June 7th a PSA 8 with the coating, again in a new flip, sold for $434. Those are both auctions. And then same week, June 5th, we had a PSA 8 without the coating, sold for $521.22. All auctions. So once again, the cards without the coating, I mean, even in this example, appear to be selling for more than the ones with the coating. So that's just very interesting. Looking at a PSA 9 conditioned here for this one. And again, these were a little bit, going back a bit further, there was a PSA 9 sale without the coating in a new flip that sold for $967 at auction. And then just a week or so before, May 25th of this year, there was a PSA 9 with the coating in a new flip that sold for $930, but that was a fixed price. But again, even there, we're seeing just a slight, in fact, quite the opposite. We're seeing a little bit of a value bump with these cards that have no peel on them, which is interesting. It's the exact opposite, really, of what this guy was saying in the post there. So I don't know. I just wanted to sort of share this market research or research data. I didn't really see anybody in the comments at on this post on Facebook. No one was calling this guy out. I certainly wasn't going to before I did my research, and even after I have, I'm not really sure I want to do that there, of all places, because again, just because I can't find the sales doesn't mean they didn't happen. But I do want to show that if one wants to simply just cherry pick data, you can make that say whatever you want to. You can make it support whatever narrative you want. And I suspect that this guy probably just has very strong personal feelings about the importance of the protective coating and keeping that maintained. I've made no secret that I'm in the peel baby peel camp. That they look so much better without them. There's so much shine and it's delightful. I can understand, wanting to keep it exactly as is. And if the message on there is not covering up the player's face or something, I'm okay with it. I did pick up this one as it was in this beautiful SGC Mint 9. And, but yeah, to say that peeling it will ruin the value of your card, I cannot find numbers to back up that claim. In fact, the numbers I'm looking at would suggest the opposite. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to say about this. So thank you for coming along, and I will see you in the next one.